All right, guys, sorry about that. Mother Nature decided for us to take a quick break, but I think we're now back online. Let me just check real quick. I think we're good to go. Bailey, sorry about that, but we were just getting started in our conversation. And I really was you were telling us about being probably the youngest head football coach in the country from a high school standpoint at age 24. Had to grow out the beard and the mustache to show a little age difference, but now you're getting up in age. You're 26 now, and you've been coaching. Is this going to be your third season with the school or with the team?
Yeah, this is going to be my third year at the Masters Academy, second year as head coach.
And tell us a little bit about the school. Tell us a little bit about the football program. With less than 300 students, what percentage of the guys in the school, or is it an all-boys school, who are on the team?
No, we've got a growing program, comparative to, years past, for some schools that are our size, they have anywhere from 20 to 25 kids. Last year, I think we carried about 35 to 40 on our varsity team, with about 30 on our JV team. And our JV team is comprised of 7th through 9th graders. So it's kind of like a morph between a middle school and a JV team. But we've got pretty good numbers. We've kind of great program. We're trying to create something that's really exciting and memorable. So just being, having all those things considered, I think it's really cool. Like I said earlier, the school is a non-denominational private Christian school, is 18 months through 12th grade and has about 1,200 students total. Really big middle school, and comparative to the size of the school. And the high school is just a bit smaller, but like I said, anywhere from 250 to 300 students. One of the most beautiful campuses around Central Florida, in my opinion, and a moderately priced school in terms of some of the private options you have here. And I think it's a wonderful place. It's a place that prioritizes Christian values first, and then academics and athletics and arts and other extracurriculars.
Very good. Well, how did you get on the track of becoming a high school coach? Is it something that you had long wanted to do, or is it just presented itself while you were at UCF or getting close to leaving college football?
Yeah, so I definitely thought as a senior at Vandy that what I wanted to do was to become a college football coach. Mm-hmm. I thought that was like my goal, and I kind of had that set in mind. And went down to UCF and then got done playing. And then I was in some conversations with some coaches, actually become a GA the next year. But I was finishing up grad school at UCF. My undergrad I got in special education. My graduate degree I got in educational leadership. So my background was definitely education in terms of what I went to school for. But I kind of use that as kind of the natural path to lead to coaching, because there's so many parallels between coaching and teaching. Coaching is just teaching football or teaching whatever sport you coach, essentially. So you become a really effective teacher, you can become a really effective coach. It's just a different way of implementing things. And so all that be as it may, my plan was to become a college coach, and I thought that's what I was going to do. I had an opportunity that I felt was lined up, and while I was finishing my master's, I was offered a teaching job working in a special ed classroom doing support facilitation in Orange County Public Schools, and I kind of took it on a whim and started coaching and just fell in love with it. Didn't end up coaching the fall there. Ended up coaching the fall in Seminole County, a school called Harry High School, where I met the current head coach that was there, a guy named Wes Allen. Wes Allen was, and still is to this day, a mentor to me. He's been a head coach for a long time around different schools in Oviedo. When he left, whenever he left Haggerty, he went to Masters. I joined him at Masters as his coordinator. And then he decided to go back into the business world, sell turf, AstroTurf. And so, I took over as head coach that same day. And, it's just something I feel led to do. I feel called to give back to the game of football. It's gave so much to me. And I really feel like there's no better way to do that than with, high school age young men. So
I was going to say, as I said earlier, the enthusiasm that comes out of you is evident that this is a profession that you've been called to do. And it's something that you clearly enjoy doing. But now you've been at the school for a few years. And do you still have any of your players tell you that they hear just a little bit of that Southern Louisiana come out in your voice, in your dialect? Or have they gotten used to Coach G now?
It's so funny, like it'll come out sparingly. If I want to like kind of turn on the accent, I could turn it on a little bit. If I start talking, if I go back home or talk to my dad a little bit, I'll start to pick it back up and you'll kind of hear it. But actually I kind of lost it quite a bit. I mean, like I said, that's come out at times. But I kind of lost it quite a bit when I first got to Vandy, because my roommate was from North Alabama and he couldn't understand anything I said. And so
who was your roommate your freshman year?
There's a guy named Cole Harden. And he ended up finishing his career at UNA, University of North Alabama. Was kind of closer to home for him. It was probably a better fit for him. But he and I still talk to this day. He's engaged, getting ready to get married and stuff like that. But he couldn't understand what I was saying. So I kind of morphed, faded out the accent quite a bit. And it's been kind of what I've been rolling with so far. But
I bet when you go home it comes back out. But Bailey, we got a bunch of Commodores with us tonight. We got OJ Fleming, we got Mark Matlock, we got Coach Jeff Madden, Darren Rothenberg, we got Jim Arnold in the house. Thank you, fellas. And I want to hear a little bit of your experiences fishing. I want to talk about, I know that your dad's a commercial fisherman. Certainly you grew up on the boats and out in the waters, and you got to share some old fishing tales with us. I love fishing in Louisiana, and I know that you've done it all your life.
It's funny, probably the best tale to tell is, I still to this day don't know if it's a joke or if my parents know either, but a lot of times they say I was conceived on a boat. So my dad's been a commercial fisherman for I think over 30 years now. Boat was named after my mom, Stella. And I mean, I grew up, I loved being on the water, loved being outdoors in general. I mean, it kind of fostered a lot of that in my life now. And man, I tell you, I really, it's some of the best quality time I get to spend with my dad is when I have the opportunity to go out on the boat with him and just talk to him and just catch up with him. And it's just good quality father-son time. I remember there's times when, we'd pull up and we'd pull up the nets and there'd be just giant bags full of shrimp. And it's just kind of a sight to behold, because then you go and you put 200 or 300 pounds of shrimp on a sorting table and you just kind of get after it. It's hard work though. Definitely hard work. And it's not for everybody, but my dad's been doing that forever and made a living out of it. And he's got a community of people that have really rallied around the industry, especially in these times where it's struggling, the economy in the world the way it is today and price of shrimp, and it's an industry that goes up and down a lot. So
I'm sure watching your dad and maybe going out with him as a child and over the years, did some of that work ethic make an impression on you? And did you use that in your football days or even now?
Definitely. I think the work ethic that I learned as a young kid and something I've carried on into my present now. But it wasn't just from my dad. My dad pushed me, and I worked with him and he was a youth coach for me as well. But my mom was probably one who pushed me even harder. As a young kid, believe it or not, I struggled in school. I had really bad ADHD and dyslexia and struggled and pretty much had to work for everything. School didn't come easy. Couldn't just go to school and just pay attention and get good grades. I had to go home and study and relearn everything and redo everything with my mom. And she kind of tirelessly worked with me and pushed me, even though she was a full-time nurse and she had a long day of working. It was a lot for her. She pushed me, and I owe a lot of gratitude to her for the work ethic she instilled in me academically. And I think even maybe more so, like that was something that pushed me, to get through Vandy, because Vandy is a great school and it's a challenging school. And, I started to figure things out as I got older, as I was getting into middle school, high school, I started to, just kind of apply that same work ethic, and it just started to catch up with me. And I started having, academic success, and then obviously going to Vandy and then grad school. And it was, it was challenging, but I was a 3.0 student at Vandy, something that takes, a high amount of pride in, especially because most people don't understand, but football is like a full-time job that you work overtime on every single week. And to do that, and it's exhausting, and it's a physical labor job, mentally, physically exhausting. And to do that while being a student at a super challenging academic school is a challenge. And but it definitely builds character, I feel like. So
Well, certainly, and I certainly did not intend to leave out your mother. I was getting to her part of her influence, but I know with you getting a grad degree at UCF and continuing your football career, I'm sure that made both of your parents very proud. The fact that you could continue to do that and still play the sport that you love.
oh yeah, definitely. I mean, from a young age, like I understood the value of a scholarship, right? And so like I had a goal from a very young age that I wanted to get a scholarship. A lot of kids, they dream of being an NFL player if you play football. Mine was to get a scholarship to go to college for free. So I understood that that would change my life, and it did to this day. I know there's people out in this world that probably have 2 degrees like me, but they might have, thousands and thousands of dollars of debt. And, fortunately, I never paid $1 for college and got 2 degrees out of it. So God was super good to me in that way. And he gave me a great opportunity. So I wanted to get after it and really, pursue it to the fullest of my abilities.
Well, when you have a special skill set, which you did, and you're have God's gifts of the abilities that you do, and not to mention your size, all of those things came together for you. And before you made the decision that Vanderbilt would be your school, were there other schools that you had considered or that were considering you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was, what I would consider to be a national recruit. Feels like everybody was recruiting me. You're coming out of high school from Alabama to Florida State, Mississippi State. And my first offer was Mississippi State. And I thought my head coach was joking, because like I had no expectation for after my junior year, we kind of put a highlight film together. And, he calls me and said, hey, Mississippi State wants to offer you. And I'm like, the Bulldogs are like some kind of community college or something. But no, it ended up being, they were like my first off. Vandy came in like 6th. And I thought, it was interesting because like a lot of people ask me why I went to Vandy, and the answer's pretty easy for me. Is I felt that's where I was supposed to be. It's where I felt led in my life, and it had everything that I wanted. It was a great city, great academics, competitive conference, and other than that, I just felt like it's kind of where God was calling me in my life, and I just loved it. I love everything about it, and have no regrets. And when I left, it wasn't because I hated Vandy. It wasn't because I hated the coaches. I just felt like, again, I was being led somewhere else to do something different, and that's what I did. I just kind of trusted my gut in that. So,
What about the home state schools, LSU, Tulane, or even closer to home, Southern Miss? All those are D1 programs, of course, and I don't know if you were just looking to spread your wings and get a little bit away from home, which a lot of guys do. But then there are others who want to be close to home, make sure that all the family can come and watch, and you could drive home, whenever the time or the occasion showed itself. But I guess Vanderbilt was just that much more appealing to you.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been one to really need to be close to home. I grew up in a small town, and I don't really feel like small town kind of fits what I'm looking for in life. I like the big city of Nashville, and then living just outside of Orlando now is kind of the same sense of feeling. I love going back there. It's always going to be there for me, but it's always going to be what you expect, and it doesn't change very much very often. And so living where I live now, I've never been really shy. I mean, I was recruited by all the in-state schools. LSU was a school that kind of, it was the most puzzling to me in my recruiting. It was one of the first schools to start recruiting me, but ended up, kind of playing games is how I felt, with my recruiting. And I never really grew up a big LSU fan or a big in-state college football fan. I actually grew up an NFL fan, huge Saints fans. And I mean, we watched college football because that's what was on. You know, they play the LSU, the Tulane, the ULL, the LA Tech. You know, that's what they play because that's what's you know, local. But you know, I ended up watching them, but just never was like a huge college football fan.
So
Other than the big games.
you had to have been what, 12 or 13 when the Saints won the Super Bowl?
2009 was what? I know that's the year, right? So
You're
it's
26. You would have been born what, in
13.
96?
Yeah, 13 years old.
Yeah, that must have made a huge impression with the
Absolutely.
hometown or the home state Saints winning it all, I'm sure. But well, let's talk a little bit about coming in. Were you in Mason's first or second recruiting class?
Yeah, I was part of his first class. So
Mhm.
Coach Franklin and Herb Hand and Brent Pry, those guys, they recruited me initially. They were on the longevity of my recruiting process. And then Coach Mason left, I think, early in January in 2018. And so or sorry, 2014. And he you know, I kind of had at a point there I wanted to make sure that it was going to be the proper fit for me. And the right options for me. So I had a point where I just kind of was like looking over and making sure everything was good, and then I did that, and then I really liked it. But we're part of his first class, and Coach Mason was a great guy. He's a really good football coach. You know, he didn't have a ton of success at Vandy over tenure, but it's hard to say how you define success.
Well, sure. It's not always and only about the wins and the losses, but you know, you were in a really unique and probably a somewhat awkward position when you're being recruited as a senior by the coach who then leaves the school. There was a lot of rumors, and I'm not here to talk bad about Coach Franklin at all, but several recruits who were being recruited to come to Vanderbilt ended up either at Penn State or withdrawing their commitments to Vanderbilt and went somewhere else. But you stuck through that commitment. When did you first hear from Coach Mason or somebody on the staff just to to introduce themselves to you and say, hey, we still want you to come to Nashville. We need you.
Yeah, well, you know, it's kind of like you build these relationships with coaches, especially when you decide to make a commitment, you know. And you know, there's like, for instance, like some kids, not particular in my case because I was an offensive lineman, but if you're a skill player, like, you know, a lot of schools, if you commit to them on any coaching staff, and now the game's changing, the landscape's changed a little bit. So I can't really say exactly to now speaking so, but back then, pretty much if you committed somewhere, like even if that coaching staff left, you would be carried over. If you were a big enough recruiter, it was kind of a public commitment and stuff like that, because they would look kind of bad, look kind of shady. So like they didn't deter anyone, in my opinion, from attending Vanderbilt when Mason came in. And he contacted me, you know, within the first week he was hired. They called all the commits, you know. But you know, Franklin, it's not like he was poaching guys. It was that he built a relationship with those kids. Those kids built a relationship with him. Yeah, I feel like it's natural to want to go play for a guy that you just build a relationship with. You know, if you tell a guy like Trace McSorley that he should be a receiver, you know, when he's a quarterback, and he's you know, turned out pretty good for him as a quarterback, probably somewhere he's going to be a quarterback. You know what I mean? And not to say that his outcomes would have been the same if he would have been a quarterback, but not to say that they wouldn't have been. You know, you know, we can speculate all we want, but I really think it just has to do kind of with relationships and the bond you feel with these coaches.
You know, and it's not like Coach Franklin went to Podunk U. He went to a very good, well-established university that has a great football program. But you're so right. It's the relationships that you build. And when you made that commitment and decided to come to Vanderbilt, I'm sure that once you signed, did you sign in February of that year? Were they still doing the signing period, at least for you at that time?
They hadn't introduced the early signing period at that point yet. So there was only one signing day, and it was in February.
Yeah, like the first Wednesday, I think, in February, or traditionally. Now, we were just I know you grew up with cell phones and all that technology and social media. But in 14, how big was social media? How had you made contact or been contacted by the other guys in your signing class before you signed? Did you know some of these or know of some of these guys?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like I was like one of the guys that was like trying to get people together. Like
Mhm.
I was the kind of guy who was like trying to get kids to come to school too. Like I was, I've always had like a very outgoing personality,
Mhm.
right? And I've always like really loved community, and being a part of a team is such a amazing thing, 'cause it's like being a part of a family.
Mhm.
And even now today, the friends that I have, I consider family because I live so far away from home.
Mhm.
There's no, I don't have any family out here really, except one cousin that lives in Cocoa Beach. But so I kind of create family in my friend groups. I think it's kind of always that's always kind of been a thing for me. And being a part of a team is just kind of a natural family.
Well,
And so,
sure, sure. Well,
I remember,
let's talk about the family on the offensive line.
oh yeah.
Who are your brothers on the offensive line when you came in that first year? Who were some of
So
the guys in your class?
yeah, so probably like the guys I was the closest with were um, Cole Harden, Bruno Reagan, a guy named Reed Nelson who's a punter actually, but and then Egidio Della Ripa who transferred to us after a year of prep school, but he was he was in our class, so
Mhm.
kind of fit in with us, and we all ended up getting a house as juniors together. We lived together, and that was a really cool and fun experience. So a few other guys like Jay Hockaday, who's a linebacker, who's a little bit younger. He was ended up being close with Cole Harden. He seemed like he was hanging out a lot, and then like guys like Ian Pfeiffer, and we looked at guys like Andrew Jelks and Barrett Guger and Joe Townsend. I remember I had a class with Joe Townsend my first year, and I mean he was just a good guy, a funny guy, and he was always very kind to us. And there's several guys that kind of create the community. But like those guys I came in with, I think were probably the ones that I end up being closest to. I still talk to Bruno every week, I would say. Um,
I
and
want to
he's
talk
probably
about I want to talk about Bruno for just a minute.
good.
His history, his background with martial arts. He and I have talked about this on this show. Really has given him a great foundation, literally and figuratively, as a lineman. I know you have to have good feet to be successful as a lineman. What did you first notice about Bruno and his footwork or his balance that maybe was different, a little advanced compared to the other guys on the team that maybe it impressed you when you first saw it?
I would say like what was if I had to say the three most impressive things about him would be his leverage, his core strength, and then his football IQ.
Mhm.
He's a super intelligent guy. Understands the game very well. I think to play the center position, you got to be. He's the kind of guy who could like do kind of the old school Shawn Michaels kick up from his back. And at 300 plus pounds,
Yeah.
Bruno probably weighs about 330 pounds now today. That's super impressive. I mean, that takes a ton of core strength, and just did a really good job of bending. And one thing that I admire about him is like I really do believe like the people you're closest with, especially in the offensive line room, are the guys that you have the best chemistry with playing on the field. And I always felt that way.
Mhm.
When him and I played beside each other, I even go back to our redshirt freshman year when I was playing right tackle and he was playing guard. And then there was a time where we battled out for, a guard spot and further than that. And that was not the best, you hate competing against your friends, but it's part of it. And then he eventually moved to center, and, we just kind of went from there. So,
It's amazing that people who may follow the sport but never played it, they're just the average fan, they don't realize the game within the game. They don't realize the mental acumen it takes to be an interior lineman, because that's not a glamour position. They're not the face of the team. They don't handle the ball. But from a mental standpoint, you have as much responsibilities as anybody else on that offense. Oh, one thing I did forget, Bailey, a fourth tribute to Bruno that's very impressive is the volume of sushi that man can put away a
yeah.
meal. I can personally attest, it's very impressive. But I want to talk about that, the between the ears. You break the huddle, or maybe you're straight on the line. take us through those 10 to 15 seconds of you getting the play, looking at the defense, and before the ball is snapped, you got like 50 things that you do. And I realize as many years as you played on the line, it's a lot of it is muscle memory. I get that part.
Mm-hmm.
But for folks who may end up watching this, who are just the casual fan that never played, take us into your mindset real quick for just a typical play, what you've got to process once you get the line call and the play call.
Sure. So I'll go out and say this, that technically, I'm probably a better player now than I was when I played in college.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been coaching offensive linemen specifically. That's kind of my niche, and training them, personally training, private training, small group training for the last 3 years. And between that, coaching it, and being a coach and learning the ins and outs, the schematics of the game and run game and stuff like that. You know, there's a couple things you look at. You look at balance, balance of the formations and where, like, logistically based off the scheme, if you're looking at a zone scheme, how the zone scheme needs to fit up in order for it to hit. You know, some coaches, one thing we do is we have a count system, in a lot of our run schemes, identifying rules. So I think the first thing that would probably pop in my head is like, okay, let me identify my rules for this concept, whether it's a power or a counter, a zone, inside zone, outside zone, sweep, buck sweep, whatever it may be, right? And then I started thinking about the start to any great play is a stance, is a great stance, and figuring out and understanding how you can manipulate the width of your stance, the depth of your stance, the weight distribution of your stance, to more effectively help yourself in any given play. Right. But also understanding that you can't make it super noticeable. It has to be something that's very subtle, because you're going to tip off teams, especially like advanced coaches and advanced players. Right. If you don't have a certain level of consistency, then they'll catch up on that stuff. In the high school game nowadays, I try to put my kids in the best position. So like I'll tell them, like, listen, most coaches aren't really looking at this, unless they're really, really good coaches, or they got a ton on staff and they know how to delegate really well. But I would say that's kind of there. And then you start thinking about aiming points, right? Or what's the concept of the play, right? If we're talking about a pass protection scheme, right? What's the leverage that we're needing to set at? Are we taking a 45-degree set? Are we taking a vertical set? Are we taking an aggressive pass pro set? And what's our aiming points going to be? Where are we going to shoot our hands? What are we going to do with our depth? If they swipe our hands, how are we going to place our hands? So it's just, there's so many things that you could think about. Like I could tell you there's 8 to 10 different moving parts in any given pass set. I'm kind of a nerd for this stuff though. Whereas most people is like, just get in front of the other guy and don't let him get to the quarterback kind of thing, but I'm very good at kind of error analysis and understanding. We do a lot of film stuff and where we can go in and break down and find the specific, problems and issues with the set or with the particular block. So that's just kind of part of what I do. But I think offensive linemen have to be the smartest guys on the field besides probably the quarterback.
I need you to get out your pad. You need to get out your pad and pen. We got coaching one-on-one with Coach Bailey Granier, and I appreciate you. I want you to get as deep into this as you want to get. And or not. I love every minute of this stuff, because this is why we do these shows each week. We want to learn the journey of all of our Commodores. We want to learn their experiences, why they went to Vanderbilt, what prompted them to go into the professions that they're in. And that last 3 minutes just now from Bailey, guys, shows you his enthusiasm and why he does the kind of work that he does. And I'm not going to call it work, because work, to me, is kind of like a chore, something that you don't enjoy doing. This is a profession, and I know that you thoroughly, even though it's hard work and many, many hours, I know you enjoy the type of work. But let's talk about that from a coaching standpoint. You're coaching high school kids, mainly ages, I'm guessing 13 to about 18, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
What gives you the most joy that you see from their accomplishments or what they're able to do on the field through your coaches and through your repetitions and just doing what you'll do at TMA?
Yeah, so I would say, like, one of the biggest things, a couple of the biggest things, the most rewarding things is like, for one, seeing the buy-in. When you could see a group of kids buy in to what you're saying is really big. I like to say I'm in the business of creating leaders, but for what we're doing, I'm trying to create disciples. So how can I create disciples in me? Right. And I'm trying to be a strong, effective leader that brings forth a message, right? Not only of football, but of like what God's calling us to do and how to act, how to be a man, and all those things that go into it, right? And so I'm trying to create disciples. How many disciples of me can I create? Essentially, if I'm doing that, and if I'm effectively doing that, that's where you can have really great teams. And I tell my kids this a lot. It's like I tell them, hey, we're trying to be perfect.
Mhm.
We're trying to strive for perfection, right? Knowing that perfection is never going to be achieved,
Mhm.
right? The only perfect person ever created was Jesus Christ, right? But if we strive for perfection, we're going to be great. We're going to be great men, great football players, great leaders, all right? Great Christians. If we try to be great, we'll be good, right? A lot of people say good is the enemy of great. Try to be good, we'll be average. If we try to be average, we're not going to be very good. And so, really, I think for me, like seeing them become those like disciples and really mature in their faith is huge for me. See them have a great experience and come together as a family, and then ultimately hit their goals. It's so rewarding. Like coaching is not a financially rewarding thing to do, but it is very rewarding in so many other ways. Just kind of seeing kids see the appreciation that they have for you if you do it the right way. If you don't do it the right way, you'll never make it in teaching or coaching.
How about Bailey when you have one of your linemen, he finally gets that bench press goal that he's been striving for 3 months, or maybe you've got a receiver who finally gets his 40 time down to whatever that goal is. That's got to be rewarding for the coaches and for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, seeing them hit their goals and seeing them as excited, I get as excited as they am. I mean, like you could probably tell by my personality, I'm a pretty excitable guy. I mean, I'll tell you the most rewarding thing that happened recently is we had a running back. He was a good player. He's been playing for me for 3 years now, and he just graduated, and he's going to be walking on. He's got PWO at University of Miami. Great school. He's a great kid, great academics, hard worker, tough kid, running back, short, stocky guy that just runs really hard, did everything I ever asked him to. But he's one of those kids that really bought in, and his recruitment was slow, really slow. Miami came in really late, offered the PWO, and it was very challenging for him and for me because I kept pushing and pursuing, and I'm like, I had a conversation with him a few weeks before the coach came to the school, and I was like, listen, man, we just got to keep being persistent and consistent. I said, you got to keep working. I'm going to just keep persistent, talking to coaches, but I was like, you got to have faith. You got to believe in yourself. And ultimately you got to understand that it's not up to you. It's up to God and what he wants for you and his plan for you. And I was like, you just got to trust his plan. You got to stop know what you need to do every day. And then just trust his plan. 2 weeks later, coach comes through, says, oh, we're looking for walk-ons, offers him a PWO. It kind of happened really quick, got him in the school. And one of the most rewarding things is when we chatted last week, he was still, even in graduation, he committed. In the midst of graduation, I hadn't seen him in a while, but we talked, and he said that pretty much between his Bright Futures, which is an in-state scholarship we offer here in the state of Florida, and his academic stuff and some other scholarships he had, he's not gonna have to pay anything to go to school. So that was like amazingly rewarding for me, especially just because we've been working for a long time, and these kids invest a lot, and you ask them to do a lot. You ask them to do a ton, and for them to finally kind of bear the fruit of their labor, it's very rewarding.
And you've walked that walk. You know what those kids are going through, what your players are going through. And I bet that's the best feeling in the world for not only you, but for the athlete and his family. But for us old heads who didn't have PWO's, preferred walk-on status back in the day, there was really walk-ons. There was no other term for it back in the day. What does a PWO mean these days? What does that entitle or mean for the athlete to come to that school?
Yeah, so essentially the difference or like how the difference is now is like a walk-on will be they'll hold like a walk-on tryout on campus, like kind of later, where essentially the kids are already enrolled in school. There's schools in the state that do that. I've seen it, I've heard about it. So that'll be like your typical walk-on, but a preferred walk-on is essentially like committing to a school and you sign to go and you have a preferred walk-on. You have a spot. They're guaranteeing you a walk-on spot at that school. So that's kind of the difference, I would say.
Well, guys, I'm talking with Bailey Granier, and he's taking us through his coaching right now at TMA in mid-state Florida. But I want to go back to your Commodore days for a little bit. But before we get to that, I want to talk about when you were watching the Saints in their heyday as a kid, did you have any linemen either in the pros or maybe at your local high school when you were much younger, like a middle schooler? Were there any players who you tried to either pattern your game after or you considered to be your sports heroes at the time?
That's a great question. There's guys that I've kind of watched and admired in my career, I would say. Like Jermon Bushrod's a guy, like an offensive lineman that I've watched a lot and studied, and there's a few others, Quentin Nelson, there's guys I like to follow, just now, maybe not even so much in that part of my career, back then it was, I was still a kid and you kind of look to more, sorry, my computer's going to die. I wanted to plug it in.
That's okay.
You look for like, you still look at like kind of the big guys. Like I loved Reggie Bush, I loved Drew Brees. And so I still followed those guys a lot, honestly, even though they were kind of out of position for me. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the ball handlers and the middle linebackers, those guys are the easy ones to follow because the camera follows them. But
Yeah,
the guys on the line, the grunt work, the guys who are the unsung heroes back in the day, maybe not so much more so. They're more known today. There's so much money at stake. They become their own brands, et cetera. They're much more well known because of social media. But when you were a kid growing up, not many outside of maybe New Orleans or who were diehard Saints fans could name two interior linemen, much less the starting five. So I was curious if you had any you tried to maybe pattern your game on, or maybe even when you got to Vanderbilt, were there guys already on the roster who you kind of looked to a little bit?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, a guy named Andrew Bridges. I mean, he was a guy that I just felt like was just really tough dude. I always consider myself like I want to be a tough player. I want to be a hard worker. And he was just a guy that I definitely resonated with. I think Andrew Jelks was just, a phenomenal athlete. And, I'm excited to see what he does in coaching. He's coaching at his old high school, Henry County. So I'm excited to see what he does and what he does with his career in that. But, those guys are guys I look to, as examples. But, specifically like NFL guys, not really. Not a bunch that I could think of offhand. I think I was just focused on, like, there's a huge difference from when you go from high school to college, and that's one reason I love training linemen now, is because I know that what we're doing, in our training sessions is stuff they'll be doing in college. If they're looking to prepare to be a college lineman, then come and work with me is a really great opportunity to, get a taste of what it's going to be like.
Well, I was going to say, you're treating these high school linemen to the same that you went through when you were in college. And, every generation, the college game when I played in the mid to late 80s is high school ball or junior high ball now. from a offensive scheme standpoint, probably from a defensive standpoint. Probably 5 years from now, you'll be doing what they're doing in the pros. And I guess that's just the natural progression of the sport, and not the pros, but in college. But that's probably just the evolution of the sport. Take us back to your Vanderbilt days. And I know that there are certain techniques, there's certain drills, there's certain things that you're doing with the kids now that you taught or you were taught or went through during your years at Vanderbilt. Can you give us a couple of those things that now are just commonplace at TMA because you're teaching it, you're coaching it, that you learned 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago at Vanderbilt?
Yeah. So, I mean, I look back and think, and we still do today, like a ton of our strike drills, stuff we do with med balls or up against the pad, up against the wall, some of our sled work, some of our, coaching in terms of pad level and power angles. And, a lot of our med ball work, stuff we do with med balls, integrating stuff that I learned at Vandy and UCF, in the weight room. What my goal was, whenever I took over, was like, I want to do what they're doing in college, in the high school level, even though like some people say, oh, well, it's too much or it's too much for the kids. And I really don't think it is. I think there's a learning period, there's a learning curve that they have to get past. But once they get past that, you see a lot of growth, Like our strength program is designed like a college strength program. We've got a strength coach that trains, 5 or 6 different NFL guys currently, alongside training our team and the rest of our sports at TMA. So in collaboration with him and what I want to see accomplished, we've got a really good thing going on. So we're trying to do the stuff they're doing at the next level, on the high school level. Because I truly believe that they can do it, and if you coach the right way, you get the right people coaching it, that you will be able to do it. So
it's so much of it is that mindset that I hear from you trying to instill in your players. You can lead them to it, but if there's not the right mindset, I think that is equally an important component as the physical part of it. But geographically, I'm switching topics on you. Geographically, you're not too far from Gainesville, where you got one of your first starts in the swamp. I want you to take us to that day. How hot was it? How nervous were you? Were you a nervous guy before the games, or were you pretty calm, or were you a talker? Tell us about that experience playing at the swamp for your first start?
yeah, no, I would say that like I was not nervous. Nervous wasn't really the feeling I was feeling. It was excitement for sure. I'd almost started the previous game because they had a guy go down early. I played most of the game, but it was it was 100 degrees probably. It was super hot in the swamp, 12 o'clock noon. It was crazy. 90,000+ fans. Electric environment. It was a really good game. It was really, really close that year. No, it was a cool experience. Like that was a really cool place to play. Oddly enough, I didn't know it until that night, but I guess I had gotten pretty severe dehydration and like sun sickness because I got really ill that night. It was funny because it was such an early game. You get back, we fly back, and it's like 4 o'clock. We're back in Nashville after playing a football game in a different, 500 miles away. I feel like it's 4 or 5 o'clock, and so naturally I just take a nap, and then I wake up at like 8 o'clock, sick as a dog. And I was pretty ill, and I guess I just didn't realize how dehydrated I really got. But it was some serious heat. But that was a really cool experience regardless, never thinking I'd be back in Florida and experiencing this heat every day now. But it is still a fun story,
Well, I was going to ask you, after about 3 years now, are you somewhat used to that Florida weather?
You never get used to this.
I think unless you're born in Florida and lived it your whole life, and even then, I know you get the summer storms, you got the heat, you got the steam, humidity. It's the whole thing that you get. What you don't get is the snow or the just that colder weather for most of the year. But Bailey, take us to beating UT at UT. That's got to be one of your best sports memories.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, it's just, and it's interesting because I didn't really get the rivalry. You don't really get it, when you first, come to Nashville, Vandy, and I'm just like, man, UT hate week. We had this whole thing where all the guys would have this funny, facial hair things they would do to kind of commemorate mustaches and handlebars and mutton chops and just all these different things that they would do. It's just kind of a cool experience. But it was serious, man. Like the people that, especially my teammates that were from Tennessee, like you could really, you really know. And the guys that were older had been around, like, oh yeah, these guys hate Tennessee. It's like it's pretty serious. But it's a great feeling when you go out and beat your rival on their home turf, and it's a great feeling, because you kind of own the state, right? That's what you kind of look to do, right? And I think at Vandy, I think you go 1-11 in the season, but if that one wins Tennessee, you might be all right. You know what I mean?
Now, did you ever roll with a mullet as your hairstyle?
So
that's because that's preferred over in Knoxville in the eastern part of the state,
So I never did the mullet thing. I was one of the, so before, like, long hair was cool a long time ago. Like my dad had long hair. My dad had long hair for a long time. And then he had cancer. And when he had cancer, he lost all his hair. And then he's never really been able to grow it back as long. But oddly enough, when I first got to Vandy, I didn't cut my hair for a really long time because my dad had cancer and I wanted to commemorate him. So I grew my hair out really long. And nowadays it's not long anymore. It's kind of this medium length. Actually, at my school, I can't have my hair touch my collar. It's just kind of an old Christian school rule. But I used to have hair that would go down, past my chest, and long hair, and I would tie it up in the back of my helmet. And I love that look. I did it kind of to honor my dad, but I never had short hair in the front. It was always just kind of long throughout. And then my sister's a barber. And so when I first got this job or was thinking about moving to the school, she's like, well, let me give you a haircut, because I hadn't really let her give me too many haircuts, being as long as my hair was. She gave me this shorter haircut, and I've been doing that kind of for a few years now. I like it, but who knows? One day maybe I'm gonna go back to the longer hair, but not the mullet. That's kind of a younger man's game now, I suppose.
Now, take us back to Neyland Stadium. You're walking off the field. You've just beaten that team. Did you have to wear your helmet into the locker room because they're throwing stuff on the field and throwing it at you guys?
I don't really remember being a lot of stuff being thrown at us there. One place that was really rough was Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they'll throw crap at you all the time, man. They'll say some really funny. Now it's like it's hilarious. I never really took the fans too seriously. Some people get all kind of riled up and pissed off. I thought it was funny. Some of the stuff they were saying. Some pretty creative jokes. Like they definitely, and I kind of felt special that they took time to look me up, or like one thing that a lot of they would do is like they'd try to find you and see if you had a girlfriend, and find your girlfriend's name and be like, say some crude things about her. And I just I felt humbled. I would laugh at it. I thought it was funny.
Well, that's a product of social media. That's the current fan being creative and doing a deep dive. But you're so right. Back in my day, we obviously, no social media, none of those things, but they'd find other things to pick at you about. We've got just a couple of more minutes until we get finished. Bailey, I appreciate your time tonight. I want to stick on campus a little bit. I want you to take us. Did you have any particular professors or courses that you really, really enjoyed or were memorable for you?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, one of the best professors I ever had was a professor by the name of Donna Ford, and she taught me two classes, two educational classes, and they were about diversity and differentiating things in American education, essentially. Not to name the courses by, not to quote the name exactly, but
Right.
I mean, she was just so, she came from such a rich history, and she was just so impressive with the things she's done in her life and the success she has. And I don't think she's at Vanderbilt anymore. I think she might be at Virginia or something. Yeah, but she was just so well educated, and she just connected with the students really effectively, and she had a ton of compassion for her
Mhm.
students, even at Vanderbilt, which I thought was so commemorative because of the crazy expectations that I feel like it's not only students but the professors are held to.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, my advisor, the special ed program, she was fantastic too. Name escapes me today.
Mhm.
I took a class, an engineering leadership class, actually, which was a really interesting course, but it was an unbelievable professor that just had so many wonderful stories, and he just talked about life. And the class was not only interesting, but like also pretty easy. And so you get to really embrace it. But throughout my time, there's so many classes. Uh, there was another guy by the name of Yared. He was a younger guy. I mean, he was such a cool guy, and he made Jared or Yaw Jared Yaw. Gosh, I forget his name now, but he was an adjunct professor, and he only taught like these couple of legal or like statistical classes, and they were so boring, but he made it kind of fun and interesting and involved you. And so I mean, Vanderbilt, I can't say enough. They've got such great professors. Um, and and I was truly blessed to, be there and be a part of that school and stuff.
Well, it sounds like you had some good relationships with them. Not all athletes at Vanderbilt, as you know, have those kind of relationships, because a lot of professors either don't care for athletes at all, or they pick on them or single them out because they shouldn't have special treatment, whatever it may be. And the guys who've been on the show have been all over the board with their experiences, but I'm glad you had several who made such a good impression. When you and your buddies were not doing your football responsibilities and you had, of course, completed all of your schoolwork for the day, where did you guys like to hang out, or where would you go in town, if anywhere that was particular?
I really felt like most of the guys that I hung out with, pretty homebodies. I mean, we'd go out to the Mumroom Street sometimes and check out the Tin Roof, and that was kind of a popular spot that guys like to go to. And then sometimes then Division Street kind of emerged, and my friend group kind of diversified a little bit my senior year, and started hanging out with some people that weren't just the football team. And so we'd go out there from time to time, but we would used to go to like the Ellison Place soda shop every weekend and
Mhm.
get like milkshakes and breakfast, country fried steaks and stuff like that. And, I places like that I love to go back to, even in my, you know, even when I get back in town, like McDougal's, nothing kind of beats like McDougal's or Hattie B's, like when you haven't had in a while. Or I remember getting up early. Sometimes we wake up super early and we go to Pancake Pantry, like
See,
first thing in the
that's a
morning.
pro move right there. You can't get to the pancake pantry at tourist hours, or you're there for forever, unless you're Warren Norman and know somebody can get you in the back door and go eat without having to wait. We learned that
Mm,
recently from Warren.
yeah.
But Bailey, there's so many awesome places to go. Can you believe how much Nashville has grown since 2014 when you got to campus to 9 years, 8, 9 years later, what it's become? I mean, it was emerging back then, but now it's just this unbelievable metropolis.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is crazy, like kind of through COVID, nobody really traveled at all, but so like definitely I didn't. And so then like getting back to Nashville after like a year probably of not being there, or maybe even more. Um, Gosh, yeah, there was a time when I hadn't made it back in a while, maybe a 2-year period, and like seeing it like change. I'm like, wow, this is a lot different. Areas are even busier than they used to be. Areas that were kind of tame, moderate, where you could kind of go and the locals could kind of go and
Mhm.
not be, full of tourists or not full of tourists, or they've driven all the locals out,
When hotel rooms are $600 a night, something is gone haywire. Last question or last topic for you, and we'll get you out of here in about 2 minutes. Coach Lee is entering his second season, his second team, if you will, team 2, and they're starting their work and have been, and the season kicks off in late August at Hawaii. I know you're super busy during your football season, but I know you keep your eye on the program a little bit. What are you hoping to see out of this second team from Coach Lee? Because to me, he certainly has a focus. He certainly he's got players who have bought in. But what are you hoping to see out of this 2023 team?
That's a great question. And I think that it takes a special kind of person to work at Vanderbilt. I think it takes a special kind of person to work at a school like I work at as well. I think he's a good fit. I really think he is. And so I think that if he can kind of just continue to create disciples with his assistant coaches and really send his message forth, and kind of create, the culture that you need. Vanderbilt's place needs to be driven through culture.
Yeah.
I don't think that ever will be, afforded the best recruits or best things. I know that they're trying to upgrade and improve facilities and those type of things, which I think is going to happen. I think that process needs to happen, if you want to be serious about, getting kids to consider your school and recruiting, because not every kid's going to be drawn to academics. And even if they, and you have to cut yourself short. You do limit the population of kids you can even offer, because of the academics. But what I would say to that is that he needs to continue to build culture. If he doesn't build culture, then it won't work, and it will never work for anyone at Vanderbilt if there's no culture. It's got to be, in my opinion, it's got to be a group of really tough, hard-nosed, disciplined guys that aren't selfish and that don't make mistakes. And I think that's what it's going to take to win is play really good defense, be a good defensive team, be an effective offensive team that doesn't lose games. Can't lose games, make people beat you. If you make people beat you, other teams will lose games on their own. And that's kind of, maybe this is the coach talking to me, because there's probably some philosophies that I share. We got a tough schedule coming up this year, but I would just say, like, all those things in mind, that they're going to have culture at Vanderbilt if they want to win.
Well, it certainly seems like that's his MO. It certainly seems, as an outsider, certainly not privy to anything that the public isn't, that seems like where he's headed. That, coupled with the administration finally supporting all the sports from a financial standpoint. Chancellor Dearmeyer certainly seems like he is very much in favor of the sports being part of the college student athletes experience. Of course, Candace Lee, our athletics director, seems to be all in. So I know you're building culture at TMA. I know that Coach Lee is building culture at Jess Neely. Bailey, number 75, Granier, I want to thank you for being on Conversations with Commodores. I've really enjoyed our conversation this evening, Bailey. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'd love to chat anytime. And if you're ever visiting the Central Florida area, man, I'd love to show you around our place and talk to you about what we got going on. And if there's anything I can do for you in terms of connecting with, former players and stuff like that, please don't hesitate. I'm always here to help and support and do anything I can.
Well, thank you. I know you're busy 12 months a year with your program and school and education, everything else that you're doing, teaching on and off the field. But thank you for spending some time with us tonight, guys. As I've told you, every Tuesday night from now until kickoff against Hawaii, we've got a Commodore on board for our weekly conversations. You guys continue to be safe out there. I hope you're having a good summer. Stay hydrated, please. It's nuts out there how hot it is, particularly in mid-state Florida. We know that. You guys, anchor down.